It started with a soft banging, a dull thud on the door that yanked me awake. I just laid there in the dark of my duplex, totally out of it. I was wiped from a 12-hour shift at the ER. Then the sound came again. 3 slow, hard knocks. And then silence. I stared at the ceiling. I could see my breath in the cold. The heat had shut off hours ago, and the room felt like a freezer. Outside, the wind was howling against the windows, making them rattle. The weather report said a winter storm was rolling in with temps in the low 20s and a wind chill near zero. The banging started up again, harder this time, more desperate. I tossed the blankets off and got goosebumps right away. The floor was like ice on my bare feet as I stumbled to the door, grabbing my phone from the nightstand. The screen flashed 4:32 a.m. in big white numbers. My heart started hammering. Nobody knocks on your door at this hour with good news. I flipped on the porch light and opened the door. Then I just froze. Brandon was on my doorstep, his little 11-year-old body bent over from carrying his sister on his back. Sophie's small arms were hanging around his neck. Her head just flopped against his shoulder. Brandon's face was chalk white, his lips had a purple tint, and his eyes had that empty, glassy stare from being out in the cold too long. He was wearing pajama pants that were soaked through at the knees and sneakers dark with melted ice. No socks. A gross garage rug, the kind you use to catch oil, was thrown over his shoulders. It was covered in grease and getting stiff in the cold. Sophie wasn't moving at all. My nurse training kicked in before I could even really think. I saw the blue first. Her lips and fingernails were a scary blue-gray. Her chest was moving up and down in quick, shallow breaths. Every time she breathed, she made this awful high-pitched sound like trying to suck air through a straw. She only had on a thin pink nightgown, but Brandon had wrapped his own heavy winter coat around her. He'd given her his coat. Inside. Now, I said. My voice came out steady, like I was at work. I reached for Sophie and lifted her off Brandon's back. She felt scarily light, and her skin was cold and felt like wax. The second I took her, Brandon's legs just buckled, and he collapsed right there on my floor. His legs were too numb to hold him up. I carried Sophie to the couch and laid her down. My mind just running through emergency procedures like a checklist. Hypothermia, a bad case of it. Her core temperature was probably under 95 degrees. She was having trouble breathing. Could be croup, maybe pneumonia. Her airway was closing up. I grabbed every blanket I owned, wrapping her carefully, but not her arms and legs. You have to warm the core first. Warm the main arteries. If you warm up frozen limbs too fast, cold blood can rush back to the heart and cause a heart attack. Her breathing was getting worse. I ran to the bathroom, yanked open the cabinet where I keep my own medical supplies, a habit from working so many night shifts. The nebulizer was still in its box, never been opened. I'd bought it 6 months ago when a patient's family couldn't pay for one. Never dreamed I'd need it for my own niece. My hands were shaking as I put the mask together, filled it with saline, and fitted over Sophie's tiny face. The machine hummed on, and a fine mist started flowing into her lungs. That terrible wheezing sound she was making got a little quieter. Brandon was still on the floor by the door, curled up. He was shivering so hard his teeth were chattering. I grabbed my phone, but my hands were shaking now from a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. I hit 911, put it on speaker, and went right back to fixing Sophie's mask. 911, what's your emergency? This is Nurse Emily Anderson, license number RN4022. My voice was perfectly smooth, all business. I'm reporting 2 pediatric medical emergencies. I suspect severe child neglect. I need an ambulance and police immediately. 2 children, ages 11 and 7. They're hypothermic, and one has acute respiratory distress. The address is 447 Maple Grove. Unit B, an ambulance has been dispatched. Stay on the line. I set the phone down and went to Brandon. His eyes were following me, but he couldn't talk. His jaw was clenched shut from the cold. I dragged him away from the door and wrapped him in my comforter, tucking it in tight around him. So I went to the kitchen, grabbed the chocolate milk from the fridge, and poured some in a mug. I put it in the microwave for 40 seconds. Not too hot, just warm enough to stop the shivering, not burn his throat. Then the microwave beeped. I tested it on my wrist. It was warm, not scalding. I gave it to Brandon with a straw. He took little sips. His hands were too stiff to even hold the mug. Every swallow made him wince. I knelt next to him holding the mug while checking Sophie's pulse with my other hand. It was thready and fast, but it was there. My brain just started ticking off injuries. Brandon had frostbites on his toes. You could see it through the holes in his wet sneakers. They were both starving, their cheekbones sticking out, eyes all sunken. Sophie's fingernails were just dirty and ragged. Brandon's hair was a greasy, matted mess. These are my brother's kids, William and Patricia. They live in a mansion in Riverside Heights. A place with 5 bedrooms, heated floors, a stupidly expensive wine collection. And they sent their children out in a blizzard wearing pajamas. My hand tightened on the mug until I heard a crack. Brandon flinched, and I forced myself to loosen up. This wasn't the time to lose it. I could be furious later. Right now I had to be a nurse. Right now these kids needed me calm. Then I heard sirens cutting through the wind, getting louder and louder. Red and blue lights started flashing across the windows. I looked at Brandon all wrapped up in my comforter. His eyes looked ancient in his little kid face. He'd seen too much. He knew too much. He wasn't surprised or confused to be here, just tired like he knew this was coming. It shattered something inside me. The paramedics and the police were going to ask questions and I'd answer every last one. Because this wasn't over, not by a long shot. This was just the beginning. The ambulance doors slammed shut behind us and the sound just echoed in my chest. Sophie was strapped to the gurney, her small face hidden by an oxygen mask that fogged up with every shaky breath. The hiss of the oxygen tank filled the small space while the EMT adjusted the dials. His hands moved like he'd done this 1,000 times. I sat next to Brandon holding his hand. His fingers were still like ice even with the thermal blankets wrapped around him. He just stared at the ceiling, his eyes following the lights with that same scary, empty look I saw at my door. "Can you tell me what happened tonight?" I asked. I kept my voice low and calm, the one I use on trauma patients you can't push. He swallowed hard. For a second, I didn't think he'd answer. Then he started talking in that same flat whisper that gave me chills. Mom and Dad left at 5 o'clock. There was a party. A casino opening. Dad said they had to beat the cold front. He paused, then swallowed. They told us to order pizza and go to bed by 9. For a split second, the EMT's hands stopped working on Sophie's IV. I clenched my jaw, but kept my face straight. He said, at 10, we noticed snow was gone. I put my coat on over my pajamas and went to look in the backyard. Sophie was supposed to wait in the living room. His voice cracked when he said it. She got impatient. She only had on her nightgown and a thin jacket. She didn't understand how cold it was getting. I watched him as he talked. He's only 11, and he's already acting like protecting his sister is a heavy coat he can't take off. The wind caught the door, he said. It slammed shut. The smart lock engaged automatically. The way he said smart lock was so bitter it sounded wrong coming from a kid. I tried the code. It didn't work. I called Dad, then Mom. No one answered. My other hand balled up into a fist on my leg. The vinyl seat creaked. Why didn't you call me? Brandon finally looked at me, and the guilt in his eyes just gutted me. I almost did, he whispered. I was about to call you, but the phone died. He took a shaky breath. Sophie was crying for Mom earlier. I let her play that restaurant game to calm her down. I just forgot to charge it. The monitor over Sophie's head was beeping steady. Every beep meant they were still alive, even though everyone who was supposed to protect them had failed. It's not your fault, son. I squeezed his hand, feeling how thin his bones were. None of this is on you. His face didn't change, but he squeezed my hand back hard. We went to the garage. There was an old, dusty rug, and I wrapped myself in it. I gave Sophie my coat. She needed it more. He started talking faster, like he had to get the words out before he choked on them. The temperature dropped, and it just kept dropping. The garage isn't heated. It got just as cold as it was outside, 23 degrees. The EMT made a quiet sound, maybe a curse, maybe a prayer. I couldn't tell. After what felt like forever, Sophie started wheezing. Bad, really bad. I knew if we stayed there, she was going to die. Brandon's voice finally cracked on that last word. So I picked her up and I walked through the forest. The shortcut to your place. It's 1 mile. The ground was frozen, the air was wet, and it just kept sucking the heat right out of us, and you saved her life. My voice came out rougher than I wanted it to. You saved both of your lives. I heard the EMT sniffle up front. He turned away, pretending to be busy with his equipment. My own eyes were burning, but I blinked it back. I could fall apart later. Right now, Brandon needed me to be strong. We pulled into Mercy General at 5:30 a.m. The same fluorescent lights I'd worked under for 12 hours yesterday were now looking down on me. They rushed Sophie straight to the ICU, and I saw a bunch of nurses I knew surround her. They put Brandon in a wheelchair. His feet were too frostbitten to stand on. Officer Peterson found me in the hall outside the pediatric ward. He was young, maybe 25, with a face that hadn't learned how to hide the horror yet. Ms. Anderson, I need to take your statement. I told him everything, just like I was writing a chart. The temperature of their skin, the color of Sophie's lips, the whole timeline from Brandon. By the time I finished, Peterson was pressing so hard with his pen he almost tore the paper. And the parents. His voice went completely flat. Where are they now? I don't know. They left for a casino opening at 5 p.m. As far as I know, nobody's reached them yet. Something cold flashed in his eyes. We'll find them. At 8 a.m., while I was watching Brandon rest, I heard the sharp click of heels on the floor. I turned and saw a woman in her 50s walking toward me. Her blazer was perfectly pressed, even that early. She had rimless glasses, and she looked me over the same way I size up patients. Ms. Anderson, she didn't offer her hand. Rachel Thompson, Child Protective Services. My stomach just dropped. Rachel walked right past me into the room where Brandon was in his wheelchair. His feet were propped up, all wrapped in bandages. She looked him over like she was taking inventory, noting every single injury, every sign of neglect. Her pen scratched away in a little notebook. It felt like an hour, but it was probably 3 minutes before she turned back to me. Ms. Anderson, I'm Rachel Thompson from CPS. Her voice had no warmth, no sympathy. It was all business. Right now, the children are in emergency protective custody. I need to do a home study at your house tomorrow. We prefer to place with family, but the safety regulations are very strict. She stopped and just stared me down. If your place isn't safe and clean right now, those kids are going into foster care when they leave the hospital. Her words felt like a punch to the gut. My place was a small duplex, a total mess from me. Working 60-hour weeks as a nurse. I didn't have any kids' furniture, no locks on the cabinets, nothing. I had no money to turn it into a place for 2 kids who'd just been through hell, but I couldn't let her see me freak out. I made myself stand tall, pulling on that calm I use when there are codes, traumas, and patients bleeding out. I'll handle it, I said. Rachel's face didn't even twitch. She just nodded, wrote something down, and walked off her heels, clicking on the floor. I just stood there in the hall. The sun was coming up, but I couldn't see it from inside. All around me were the usual hospital sounds, shift change, footsteps, monitors beeping. I could hear the nurses giving their reports. This was my life for years. But now I felt like a total outsider. In here, my niece was fighting to breathe. My nephew was in a wheelchair, couldn't even feel his legs. And somewhere out there, my brother and his wife were sleeping off booze and gambling debts. They had no idea their kids almost froze to death. And tomorrow that woman with the glasses and notebook was going to decide if I was good enough to keep them safe. I had less than 24 hours to figure out how to be a mom. The lights buzzed over my head like they didn't care about the world crashing down on me. I took out my phone and started making a list in my head of everything I could sell. I had to do it fast. It had to be enough. It just had to. I turned back to Brandon's room, bracing myself. The hallway looked so long and empty, but I started walking. Just then my phone buzzed. It was the pawn shop on 5th Street, just like I was waiting for. They said they'd buy my grandma's diamond necklace. They told me to bring it in this afternoon so they could look at it and give me a final price. I just stared at the screen. The phone's light was on my face in the dark hallway. I felt absolutely nothing. No sadness, no regret. It was just what I had to do to get by. I put my phone in my pocket and looked back at Brandon's room. I could see him through the little window in the door, sitting in his wheelchair. His bandaged feet were up on the rests, and he was just staring at the wall with these old, tired eyes. A kid who just carried his sister through a blizzard shouldn't look so empty, like he was just waiting for whatever came next. I wasn't going to let him wait. Earlier, around 6:10 this morning, the wind was biting. Officer Peterson pulled up his collar as he walked up to the Andersons' mansion. The place was all modern, lit up with fancy lights that probably cost more than he makes in a year. Motion lights flickered on, lighting up the curved driveway. A Tesla was parked there, covered in frost. Peterson hit the video doorbell. He heard a soft chime from somewhere inside the huge house. He waited 10 seconds and pressed it again. The little camera lens blinked red. It was recording. Mr. Anderson, this is Officer Peterson, Police Department. We've confirmed there's no adult here during a dangerous storm. Your children are at Mercy General Hospital in emergency care. He paused, letting the words sink in for the recording. You need to show up immediately and speak with Child Protective Services. If you don't, it'll be recorded as child abandonment. Then silence. All you could hear was the wind whistling past the big columns out front. 40 miles away, William Anderson was nodding off in a leather chair at a high-stakes blackjack table. Most of his chips were gone. Patricia was over by the slots, laughing way too loud thanks to her 5th martini. The second he got the notification, his stomach dropped even before he saw what it was. Front door motion detected. He fumbled for his phone, almost dropping it. The app was loading slow. It's always slow when you're in a hurry. Then the video feed popped up. 2 cops in uniform were standing on his porch. One of them was talking right to the camera. He couldn't hear what they were saying. He didn't have to. The way they stood so stiff and official, the cop car in the driveway, he knew exactly what was going on. Patricia, his voice was choked. Patricia, we have to go, right now. She looked up from her drink, her mascara all smudged. What, we just got here. The cops are at the house. Her face looked ghostly under makeup she'd put on 12 hours ago. The ER lobby smelled like burnt coffee and pure panic. I was on my phone, checking my bank account and trying to figure out how fast I could sell everything I owned when the automatic doors slid open right at 9 o'clock. William walked in first. His expensive suit was all wrinkled like he'd slept in it. He had. His hair was sticking up on one side where he'd tried to pat it down in the car. His Rolex watch caught the harsh light, a sick gleam on his pale wrist. Patricia stumbled in right behind him, still in her fancy dress from last night. The silk was dirty and dragging on the floor. She stank of gin and cigarettes. Where are they? Patricia's voice cracked, echoing in the quiet waiting room. Everyone turned to look. Where are my babies? A security guard started walking toward her, holding up a hand. Ma'am, you'll need to calm down. I'm their mother. She lunged for the nurse's station, her heels clicking wildly on the tile. Someone tell me where my children are right now. That's when William saw me standing by the hallway. For a second, our eyes locked. I saw the gears turning in his head. I watched his face go from panicked to something much colder. He straightened his jacket and walked toward me like he owned the place. Emily. He kept his voice low, reasonable. It was the voice he always used when he wanted something from me. Thank God you were here. This whole thing, it's a terrible misunderstanding. I just stood there. I didn't say a word. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. I know how hard nursing school was for you. Those loans. What do you have left? 60,070. His breath smelled like cheap booze and desperation. I'll pay them off, all of them. Today. You just tell the police this was an accident. My hands started to shake. I pressed them flat against my scrubs, trying to steady myself. You locked your kids outside in 23 degrees.